Hello and welcome to the Young Entrepreneur Syndicate podcast. Rod Kuntz here, and I am Jim Riley hosting you today. Rod, how you doing, buddy?
Jim, I am so excited to be here. This is literally the bright spot, one of the two bright spots in my week, right? Monday night with the Young Entrepreneur Syndicate is one, and doing this podcast with you on Thursday mornings is number two, because no matter what's going on out there in the world, in the nation, in our communities, this is something we have control over. And, you know, we're always committed to bringing the best out and focusing on the positive. So I need it. I need my recharge.
Well, I appreciate that. And hopefully if you're listening, you feel the same about getting a little recharge on the podcast. So I had a chance to be on a guest on a podcast last week with Anthony Pirelli. He's got a new podcast out. Let's see if I knew I'd mess it up. It's called The Billion Bet. The Billion Bet is his podcast. And it's a pleasure to be one of his early guests for his show. So Anthony, thank you for having me on. We love what we're doing, to Rod's point a moment ago. And yeah, here we are. So Rod, I'm glad you feel that way. I enjoy our time together as well. What I really like about it is I get to see the numbers, you know, because on the publishing side of this, I get to see the numbers and the downloads. We had 201 downloads yesterday on this show, which is a lot, you know, and the next day we've already had 70 today.
So wow, that's awesome.
People are listening. We're inching closer to that 100,000 downloads on my show in general. So pretty exciting. You know, I've got a topic, right?
Well, I certainly hope so. Yeah, I keep thinking, Jim, one day I'm going to have to flip the script on you and say, you know what, Jim, I'm not going to talk about what you want to talk about today. You're going to talk about what I want to talk about, but I'm not there yet. I haven't run out of things to say. So let's see if you can stump me today.
Well, I can't, because it was actually your topic from last week, and you probably already forgot about it, but I didn't. I wrote it down. However, before we get going on that, I want to talk about something real quick. And I think this is a very valuable lesson for our listeners. Something to consider day in and day out. I got a text message the other day, and it said, "Hey, I received your number on a note card in a book, and it said if I ever needed help to call." I was like, "What kind of bot is this?" Right? some bot from a foreign country trying to sell me, you know, something I don't need or want. Right? Anyways, I let it sit there for the day, and then it came back and said, so whose number is this? And I said, well, what book was the number in?
Is it one of yours?
No, it wasn't one of mine. This was from 2012. So we're talking about 11 years ago. And it was a book that, so I buy a lot of extra books as it relates to marriage counseling and support of, you know, relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And back then I had gone through my divorce, and I just was so passionate about like trying to help people stay together that there was a book that I purchased a whole bunch of. It was called When Lost Men Come Home. And I'd given it to this particular individual. And he told me that was the name of the book. And I said, oh, well, that relates back to this time when I was in Newport Beach at Mariners Church. I said, I probably gave it to you then. I said, how's life? Are you doing well? And he said, no, I'm struggling. Right. And I'm not going to go into that. But what I'm going to go into for a minute before we really hit today's topic is you never know the effect and influence you're going to have on somebody at any given moment, anywhere. And, you know, I try to lead a life of doing the best I can, being as helpful as I can, being as caring and genuine and authentic as I can. And that will never bite you in the butt if that's who you are. And I'm so proud looking back at the person I was in 2011 to offer somebody some help and advice. And he needed it all these years later. And then, so this has been going on for 3 days. We've been going back and forth on text. He goes, Jim, I really appreciate you. You don't even know me. And I just said, it doesn't matter. I'm here for you. Right. And so when I look at, you know, us as people in general in society or as family members, but also us in business, how we treat people, how we conduct business, how we go about our daily affairs has long-term impacts that we may or may not ever see the results of. And so that's my point, is do the best you can always.
Man, I'm speechless. That's what's going through my mind here is, we do this as a labor of love also, this podcast. And I can only hope and imagine that someone 10 years from now pulls one of these up on YouTube, or somebody sends it to them and they think, wow, that changed my day. That changed my life. That changed how I do business. And to think that maybe, just maybe, we have that kind of power is pretty amazing. So we better keep it positive. We have a high standard to live up to when you start thinking about your role in the future.
Well, right. And right there is my case in point, is that we have a high standard to live up to, but I think we all do. We all have a high standard to live up to, and we should aspire for that. I went out to dinner last night, and small town Montana, I ran into a whole bunch of people I knew. Well, the first two people I ran into, I walked over and said hello, and they immediately started digging in on a group that a lot of us are a part of, one of those political groups, just very, very negative. And I said, hey, look, I don't attend enough to understand what the issues are right now, but I will tell you this. I'm going to put my blinders on and stay focused on what's best for me and what I can contribute in a positive way. So I'm sorry that that's how you feel, but basically what I did is I shut that conversation down before it went any further. I didn't feed it, and I knew that these people were looking for fuel to continue that, that fire that they had. And I put that out, and I walked away, and I'm sure they continued their conversation in the same heat that they had before I arrived. But to me, that was doing the right thing, setting the right standard by my standard of living and what I want to be known for. And because it's interesting, the next person I ran into actually knew them as well, and even referred to as, oh, are they still upset and all? Yeah. So you have to be really careful about your tone, who you are, what you want to be known for, because these could have long-term effects. And I can't help but think, like businesses that are successful do it right every time for as long as they're in business, Right. And I can't help but always going back to like that In-N-Out example. They've been around since 1948. They still hold the same reputation today as they did 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years ago, all the way back to 1948. There's other companies like that, but that's just my own personal experience. I could speak for them. And, if you need an example, look around and see people that have been doing it right for a really long time and go, that's who I want to be.
The other thing too, Jim, is complaining just to complain needs to stop. That's the first and easiest thing someone can do to change their life. Stop complaining. Be solution focused. And if you're solution focused, you're looking at that outcome. You're outcome focused, right? And how can you better a situation? Start looking at and paying attention to and focusing on that instead of the problem.
Yeah.
And don't look at everyone else's part of that problem. What can you do to fix that problem? What part of it that rubs up against your life is there for you to fix? And if it's not for you to fix, why deal with it?
Yeah.
Why grapple and get into that negative mud bath if you don't have to? It reminds me of and I never understood the story. It was called the Tar Baby.
I don't know.
You heard about the Tar Baby?
Nope.
Tar Baby. Somebody's complaining about this baby that's all full of tar. And the people who complain are the ones who grab the Tar Baby. And then they just get tar all over themselves, and they complain and they complain and they hand it off to someone else. And so if you're just complaining, you're going to be part of the Tar Baby. You're going to get tar all over you. So somebody needs to stop and clean it up. And then the next person doesn't have to deal with that. It's a tar baby. It doesn't have to be a baby. It can be, a tar, an oil bird or whatever. But if it's in your realm to fix, then fix it. If it's not in your realm, leave it alone, or you're going to get soiled. Your spirit will get soiled. Your mental attitude's going to get soiled. Your reputation is going to get soiled. So stay out of the mire. Stay out of the tar. Tar baby.
Love it. Love it. Well, to close on this thought, going back to my example of this person that reached out after all these years, I know the situation that we were in a group, and, people in that group were going through tough times, and, we were there to support one another, and probably a lot of complaining going on around the room. And I'd like to think, and I think my actions show this to be true, is that instead of just complaining, I offered help to lift somebody up by giving a number and a resource tool for them to be better at the time. And so this isn't about me. It's just about an example that I'm giving you where I stepped up to be that person that we all should aspire to be by giving, caring, being authentic, being real, and providing solutions instead of passing off that tar baby. So, okay, let's shift gears and let's give them what we promised. And I don't know if I've got enough material on this, but what we talked about, or we briefly touched on in the last show, Rod, was trade school and the value of trade school and trades in the marketplace. And I'll tell you, man, I wish I had gone to a trade school when I was young. I worked a blue collar job, and then I worked eventually I was in a very white collar job, and I look back on it and chuckle now. My wife said to me last night, she says, what quantifies blue collar? And I said, well, pretty much if you're working in an office indoors, I always considered that white collar. And if you were outdoors working with your hands, or some type of, day labor, you're blue collar, it was one description. I'm sure there's a technical one, but man, do I wish that I learned how to weld or how to build things in construction. I can do some construction now. I'm building a pergola on my patio, but to have those skills at this time in my life, if I had to do it over again, I'd go to some trade school. So that's what we're going to talk about. Did you have some initial thoughts? Because this was your idea to talk about.
Wow. Let me tell you what. Well, if I had remembered that we brought that up and that we were going to talk about it, I've been collecting information on this, Jim. And part of that information is when I run across newspaper articles, news stories, books, I make a file and a note, and including memes that I've run across that break it down. And here's just one that I could go through my phone and find 4 or 5 of these, but I'll tell a personal story first. And that is with my kids, I wanted all of them to learn a trade. Even if they were going to college, my goal was you have to have something to fall back on.
Right.
And not only that, I think you learn something by working with your hands and a deeper appreciation for others who do work with their hands. And having grown up around construction, my dad was in construction. That was a trade. And I learned so much from the ground up, plumbing, wiring, stripping forms. I had all the dirty jobs, but they were so, they helped form who I am as a person and the appreciation and all that kind of stuff. So not even all the great things I learned, but just the character building. And throwing into trade schools, I'm going to throw the military into that too, because I was in the military also, and that was more like a trade school in many ways. In fact, I got some college credits for my military service that, transferred over into that. But that's another way to look at trades. But here's what I pulled up on my phone really quick. Just a plumber can make $30 to $45 an hour. A crane operator, $30 to $42 an hour. Wind turbines, $27 to $40 an hour. A commercial driver, $25 to $40 an hour. Heavy equipment, $36 an hour. HVAC techs, $40 an hour. Auto body repair, $40. Welders, $32. Carpenters, $52 an hour. Auto mechanics, $32 an hour. You start adding that up, and okay, maybe you don't want to do that for your whole life. But maybe if times were tough and business was slow, if you had something to fall back on, you're not going to get your house repossessed, foreclosed on. You're not going to get a car taken away. You're not going to have to give up on your lifestyle. So having something to fall back on, my oldest daughter, for example, we encouraged her. She went on to college, but before that, we sent her to hairstyling school. And, my daughter-in-law, Riley, she went to nail tech school.
Huh.
Women always want to look pretty and stuff. They have skills that they can always fall back on. If something were to happen, they can do other things. And, my youngest son, he's worked on wind turbines. He's worked in engineering in the oil fields all over the country. And now he's got his own business and he doesn't have to worry about reporting to someone else. But you can do and learn so much. And to me, it's security. Everyone talks about wanting to have, supplemental income or residual income. And to me, that's a residual backup plan. If things go south, and we've seen it in my lifetime, I've seen it happen. 2008, the Great Recession, all these great white collar indoor jobs that just disappeared. And if you didn't have skills, other skills, whether it was trades or other social skills and, sales, different sales and that sort of thing, you suffered. And a lot of people had to start completely over. And there's nothing worse than starting over when it's not your choice. You can start over when it's your choice, and it makes it's almost exhilarating. When you launch a new career, go sideways in a career, start a new business, start a new company. But when you're forced to do it, it takes the fun out of it. So be in control. So that's just one thing. I can do more. I've got a whole series of compilation of the income stream differences between trades and people who go to college.
Well,
it's mind-blowing.
How about we do this? You pull them up in the future, and occasionally on a show, we'll touch on a trade and the value of that trade based on your notes in your compilation. You talked about there's nothing like working with your hands. You were on top of me the other day for getting up at 8 a.m. And I said, well, I've been up till midnight, 1 o'clock. So, which is true, which means I needed 8 hours. But one of those nights that I was up so late, I was out sanding our deck till 11:30 p.m. till 11:30, sanding the deck. And when I got done, I took the air compressor and blew off all the dust and all that. I'm looking, I go, wow, this looks good. Then next morning I got up, sun comes out, and I see the deck all freshly sanded. I'm like, this feels really good. I mean, the satisfaction from working with your hands, doing a job well done, there's nothing like that I can compare it to. I mean, yeah, I've put together some nice PowerPoints and presentations and things like that on the computer, but nothing like just working with your hands, especially working with a material, whether that's wood, steel, or rock or something, and creating something out of it.
Well, it's a form of art also. It's a form of expression. How you do anything is how you do everything. So if you did a sloppy job on it, you're going to be reminded of it every time you look at it. So, I mean, there are life lessons in that also, but just the artistry. And my son-in-law can do incredible things with metal and with wood. And he has a lot of tools to be able to do that. I don't, but I have an appreciation for what he does. It is just astounding that he can take an idea in his head and turn it into something that's functional. So you've got the form of it, it's functional, but it's also artwork. You can see it in there, and it's something that no one else can duplicate. So challenge yourself to use your hands more and build. I get satisfaction out of looking at my yard after I'm done mowing it. It's like, yeah, look at those lines, and I'll mow it one way, vertical one time, horizontal the next, and then I go diagonal, just to change it up and make it look more like a golf course or a ballpark than just a lawn. But there's satisfaction in that, and it's okay. People, I think, gave blue collar maybe a bad rap, and I think it started with our educational system. where the focus has always been not just to be educated, but to go to college. That's the whole goal of high school, is to prep you for what? College. And what's the goal of college? To get you into a white collar job, not to get you into a trade job, get you into a white collar job. And the world would stop functioning if we followed that paradigm. If everyone followed that paradigm, it would collapse. And we're seeing some of that now. We're seeing some of the collapse of our internal society because of that shift in mental focus and mental attitude to go down that path. And read an article 2 days ago that said several major corporations, from Amazon to Walmart, are no longer requiring a college degree.
Imagine that.
Imagine that. So they would rather have people with trade knowledge. So your timing on this is, we're ahead of the trend. We've been ahead of that trend for a long time, Jim.
I'm chuckling because at the pinnacle of my white collar job as the vice president of Kettle One Vodka, showed up and had the thick carpet and the beautiful desk and everything. I had a gardener, a house cleaner, went out to dinner all the time, so it's not like we cooked, had somebody to take out the trash for me, and somebody to pick up the dog poop. At the pinnacle, like, talk about not getting your hands dirty, right?
Right.
And I'm laughing because my favorite thing to do right now is mow my lawn, clean my house, and really my like where I get into my head zone is to go out there and drag my lot. And what I mean by that is drag the horse poop around the lot, right? So all the things I used to pay people for because I didn't want to get my hands dirty in that white collar world are my favorite things ever now. And I realized, I'm not saying you should enjoy picking up after your dog, but the point is that there's so much satisfaction in a job well done, especially when you're using your hands and your energy to do it instead of paying somebody to do it or not do it at all. Just going back briefly, and we'll wrap this up, is as a kid, my dad was blue collar, and we were always pulled onto the job with him. So we learned construction and gardening and all these things. And so I'm appreciative for that. Although I do, as I suggested earlier, wish that I had taken some time to go to like a welding school or something, so I had really the technical knowledge of those skill sets. And I think the takeaway for this show, and Rod, I'll let you close with your takeaway, is that if you're listening and if you're in the place of teaching people or your kids, take the opportunity to give them advice on learning a trade, as Rod did with his kids. I think it's so important. And if you're young listening to this show, don't be afraid to take a left turn for a little while and learn a trade and have that backup. And I tell you what, especially when times get hard, maybe you don't go on and need the backup, but times get a little bit tight and you can do that in your spare time and make a few extra dollars. You'll be grateful that you have a skill set outside of your 9 to 5 or whatever that looks like. So those are my closing thoughts. What are yours, Rod?
Well, I think what we already touched on, and that it's not just a business thing. It's not just to protect yourself financially. It's the personal satisfaction you get. And so look for ways to improve yourself constantly, but not just with books, not just with podcasts, not just with, another training seminar and that sort of thing. Look to improve your whole self. And that means getting your body involved. And that's part of why good physical activity, right? You're getting your body involved in that. We're not just intellectual, mental, spiritual creatures. We're also physical creatures. And we need to have that tactile stimulation of hands-on. So Don't be afraid of it. Get your hands dirty. And if you don't like getting your hands dirty, get a pair of gloves. They make some great ones.
I love it. Okay, so the 2 takeaways today is what you do now, realize that it'll have long-term lasting impact on others. Do it with authenticity, gratitude, grace, kindness, all those other descriptives. And then the second thing is if you have an opportunity to learn a trade or encourage somebody to get into a trade for no other reason than having some type of experience in a different arena, there's tremendous amounts of value in that. So I would highly encourage that. So listen, if you like what we're talking about, or if you've got your own topic, send it in. We'd love to hear from you. We're happy to talk about whatever and bring some value and advice. If you're interested in our coaching, that is the Young Entrepreneurs Syndicate.com. Join the group. It's $99 a month, which is pennies compared to, I believe, the value you get. We do a weekly Monday night Zoom call, 30 minutes of education, 30 minutes or more of open Q&A for you to bring your business questions to the group and get some value out of that. Not to mention, we have a ton of back-end content on our website that's for our members only, as well as we have our own private community. So we'd love to have you. And Rod, always good as usual to do another show with you and bring some value to people.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. Like I said, my second favorite time of the week. And Jim, you have a great weekend. I'm looking forward to hearing from you on Monday night.
Sounds good. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.